time that I will spend on is not just about talking about horseshoe crabs in Singapore. Yeah, I'll be talking about horseshoe crabs in a general aspect, and I'll bring in some examples for Singapore, so at least there's some perspective for us here. Alright? So horseshoe crabs, fantastic color. So horseshoe crabs they belong to the animal kingdom, okay, and they are arthropods. Arthropods are animals that have jointed segments. And some of the arthropods that you know of are insects and all the stuff under the sea, in the water, prawns, lobsters, crabs, crustaceans. Okay? And then we have myropods. Myropods are worms that you find on land that have legs. And then we have this thing called chelicerates. So chelicerates are animals that have a funny mandible sort of thing that helps to keep their food. And if you realize that actually the horseshoe crabs belong to that group of chelicerates over here, instead of the group that crabs belong to, which are crustaceans. So this group of chelicerates, they are home to animals like spiders and scorpions, and so you realize that the horseshoe crabs are more closely related to spiders and scorpions rather than the true crabs. So in this group, we have the Limulus family, and in that family we have 4 genuses, and these are the 4 genus. Then we have the Carcinoscopius, Tachycleus, 2 species, and the Limulus, 1 species. This one is not alive anymore, it's extinct. Along the geological timeline, okay, you realize that horseshoe crabs go very long way back. The trilobites became common at about 490 million years ago, and then horseshoe crabs appeared, they say, around 450 million years ago. And then you see the red dots, okay, these are the 5 mass extinction events that happened. 200 million years ago, Pangea, which is what used to be the entire globe system, okay, Pangea broke into the present-day continents. And we humans, the ancestors, appeared about 1 million years ago. So on the geological scale, you realize that horseshoe crabs survived 5 mass extinction events, and they have been around for a very, very long time. Extinctions that killed the dinosaurs did not kill the horseshoe crabs. So I'm going to be sharing with you about a conference that I went to in Japan last year, and it was organized by the IUCN Species Survival Commission, and a subgroup under that, which is the Horseshoe Crab Specialist Group. And much of the information I'm sharing today will be based on my learning from that workshop that I went to last year, which was sponsored by NSS. Okay, so here's a brief biology on horseshoe crabs. We have some specimens here. If you like, you can, maybe I'll just pass it around so you can look at this as I talk about it. Okay, the horseshoe crabs have a very hard carapace. That's the one on top. Okay, as they molt, the carapace opens up. The new young molt comes out. They are very soft. Eventually, the carapace hardens to what you would see on that specimen being passed around. They also have 2 eyes by the side. They are compound eyes, but actually they don't see as well as insects do. They can only differentiate more or less day or night, probably sense male and female. You also realize they have eye spots all around the underside as well. They breathe through their gills. They have a tail. The tail has no poison whatsoever. It is merely used as a tool to steer itself in the water, or to right itself when it's upside down. It uses the tail to flip itself back up to the correct position. These are the mouth parts. In the middle, it uses the first 2 pairs of claws to feed food inside, and it usually feeds as it walks on the ground. So if it doesn't walk, usually it doesn't feed, which has implications later as they mate. So usually if they are mating, the male is on top and the male doesn't get to feel what's on the ground, so he actually doesn't feed until he finishes his job. Okay, so here is a very brief history on what horseshoe crabs are used for traditionally. It is a food source for people who live along the fishing villages. A lot of them, they eat the roe, the eggs of the horseshoe crab. But I understand from talking to people in Singapore, sometimes they just need to barbecue whatever you get, you just just barbecue and just eat it. It's something crunchy. If it's a very small horseshoe crab, I think they said it tastes like soft shell crab if you fry it or grill it or barbecue it. You just eat everything. The Malays have also used the talson. The talson is the tail, and they've used the tail as a guide as they read the Quran. They use that as a marker to read, to see where they are along the line. Some Malays also mentioned that they burn the carapace. So you break it up, you burn the carapace, and apparently the smoke is supposed to ward off evil spirits. So this is their traditional belief. The Chinese have also hung the carapace over to ward off evil spirits, and they have also used the carapace as a decorative item. So either earrings or chains, necklaces, bracelets, things like that. And here you have a picture of a monk who is using the horseshoe crabs as a religious release ritual. So some religions, they believe that if you release the animals back into the wild, it brings you good karma. And so because you want to do that, therefore they catch a lot and they keep so you can release it. It defeats the purpose, but sometimes they do that. So this picture here shows the horseshoe crabs that were caught for release. The commercial value for horseshoe crabs, number one, is fisheries. People catch horseshoe crabs as bait for bigger fish. But more importantly, pharmaceutical companies want horseshoe crabs because of the blood that they have. The picture that you see there is taken off the internet. The blood is blue in color because it is copper-based blood, unlike ours, which is iron-based blood. This particular blood has got materials that allow the substance to coagulate if there's contaminants present. So with all these things that horseshoe crabs are used for, what is the status? The American horseshoe crab is near threatened. You don't find the American horseshoe crab in the Asian areas. You find them on the Bay of Florida, Delaware Bay, on the side of America. The Asian horseshoe crab or the Chinese horseshoe crab is data deficient. Again, we don't find this horseshoe crab in Singapore. We do find this in areas of the Chinese waters, but we also find tridentators in parts of Malaysia and Indonesia. That one is data deficient. The last two horseshoe crabs is what we have in Singapore, the coastal horseshoe crab, data deficient, and according to the Singapore Red List, it is endangered. The mangrove horseshoe crab is data deficient, and according to the Singapore Red List, it's vulnerable. Okay, and this was based on 2008 data. We haven't reviewed it since then. So what do horseshoe crabs need to survive? Basically a roof over their head, just like we do. They need food, just like we do, and they need to survive predation, unlike us. We are the predators. Okay, I'm going to talk about predation first because that's a natural phenomenon that happens. We eat, they need to eat, they need to get eaten as well so that their numbers are kept in balance. So how they protect themselves is through a hard carapace. When you have something hard, it's very difficult for other animals to come and eat or peck at it. They also have very sharp structures, as you would have noticed by the side and the tails. Also flicks up in order to ward off predators. Nevertheless, there are animals that get to them. And so on the screen, we see egg predation. Spawning season for horseshoe crabs, especially the Atlantic horseshoe crab, it coincides with the migration of some birds in the Atlantic flyway. That picture is of a red knot that you find in America, and the eggs are a massive energy source for these birds as they continue on their last leg in the US. And then juvenile mortality can be because of other larger animals that eat them. So you have examples of horse conchs, that picture there, that is actually eating a smaller size horseshoe crab. All it needs to do is to suck out whatever soft parts on the underside, and that's its food. We have alligators and crocodiles that eat horseshoe crabs, and in Singapore I'm sure crocodiles have eaten horseshoe crabs. And we also have long-tailed macaques in Singapore that eat horseshoe crabs. So I'm going to show you a video now of sorry. Yeah, I'm going to show you this video time when I discovered that this was actually a horseshoe crab and not something else, realized that it was most likely a coastal species of horseshoe crab because it was quite large. And what he's eating is the roe, and he's very skilled in tearing apart the underside of the carapace. Then I think some other guy comes along and then he doesn't want to share, so he runs away with the horseshoe crab. Yeah. Okay, so I'll just stop the video there. Okay, and then so what do horseshoe crabs eat? This was research done by a honors student a couple of years ago, Jermaine, and there hadn't been any research done in Southeast Asia regarding the food of horseshoe crabs, so this was quite novel. She managed to find broken pieces of polychaetes, which are something like worms, and a lot of other smaller crustaceans and other invertebrates, and all broken pieces which she managed to identify. We are waiting publication for this, so once it comes out, I think it will be quite exciting to see what else she has. So we finally go on to the most important section, what happens to the home of the horseshoe crab. The house or home of the horseshoe crabs consists of the bottom sediment, okay, and the sediment cannot be anoxic, so it needs to have certain level of oxygen. It cannot be too deep, and it cannot be sulfur-based sediment. Sediment shouldn't be toxic, saline condition, and a place that caters to all the different life stages of the horseshoe crabs. So if we look at the threats to the habitat of the horseshoe crab, right, there are short-term threats and there are long-term threats. A short-term threat will include exploitation, things like bait fishery, things like aquarium trade, and harvesting for blood. So these are short-term threats to horseshoe crabs because it's an immediate problem. Bait fishery, we have very little information. I'll go into each of these in a bit. Long-term threat will include habitat loss, and I'll take up the rest of my time talking about habitat loss. Okay? So your short-term threat, harvesting, what you have there is the limulus amoebocyte lysate and the Tachypleus amoebocyte lysate. So these are the animals that they harvest the blood from to test whether the pharmaceutical drugs have any contaminants. Because they harvest this in very large numbers, there is a market for this. Especially the limulus species has got quite a few regulations, but the Tachypleus species does not have any regulation whatsoever. In the Chinese market, you have almost 600,000 pairs being harvested every year. Their blood is totally drained, so it is not like you take only 10% or 20%. The blood is completely drained, so the animal dies. Then they take the animal and they sell it to secondary markets for sale, for food, or for anything else. Okay, so the Chinese horseshoe crab amoebocyte lysate market is very bad. It is not sustainable and it will not last in the long run. The aquarium trade, what you read in the middle there was actually an advertisement in one of the Asian countries. They catch horseshoe crabs and they sell it, and they market the horseshoe crab as sand stirrer and detritus eater. And people tend to buy this because there's really nothing much to care for. You just need to put the animal in the tank and it will do its job. In Singapore, there are some aquariums that do sell horseshoe crabs. Some of these aquariums along Lim Chu Kang, they do sell horseshoe crabs for aquarium trade. And then bait fishery and fishery bycatch, we have very little information on this. We have no concrete figures on how much money they make out of it, or how much they catch, or how little they catch, where do they catch them from, and where do they send all these things to. Okay, so we have very little information on bait fishery and fishery bycatch. In Singapore, we do have bycatch of horseshoe crabs, and it's not so much because of commercial fishing, but it's because of artisanal fishermen who have nothing to do and they are bored, and maybe this is what they've been doing all along. The horseshoe crabs get trapped, and then what they do with it, we don't know. Sometimes they throw it away, sometimes they burn it, sometimes they sell it. We don't know what happens, and there's no figure on that. Okay, the alternative to the first short-term threat NUS, a husband and wife team from NUS, discovered or managed to clone a very important factor that causes the coagulation. So Prof Ding and Prof Hobo managed to clone this factor C, and a test kit has been made. Unfortunately, it is not so easily available. I think the patent is for only one company, and to get that test kit is a lot more expensive than just harvesting it from the animal directly. So when you have a cheaper option, there is no reason why people would choose a more expensive, more difficult option. Secondly, in America, they actually have very good rules on regulating the harvesting of horseshoe crab blood. All horseshoe crabs must be returned alive, and they cannot be dumped from the ship, or they cannot be thrown out. They have to be returned one by one to the sea, make sure that they are alive. The quantity harvested cannot exceed the carrying capacity of the vessel, and I think at every point in time you can only harvest about 20% of the blood. The rest of the blood cannot be harvested. Unlike the Chinese species, where the Chinese, they harvest 100% of the blood, they drain the blood out of the animal. Oh, and in America, they also prohibit the harvesting from certain spaces. So if it's a nursery for the young ones or spawning grounds, you're not allowed to harvest from there. So you let the babies grow into a bigger species before you harvest when they're out in the wild. So in Singapore, the short-term threat will include bycatch. Okay, as I mentioned, artisanal fishermen who are bored or have nothing to do. Or usually these are people who used to fish in their younger days, have now maybe retired, and then they now want to go back to fishing. The place that is shown in that picture is a place where we actually find a lot of horseshoe crabs, and it's I think not very clear from there, but they are actually prawn traps or crab traps all along the bund, and because they leave it there, and then the tide comes up, and then whatever animals get in there, they get in there, the tide goes out, and then they collect all these back to harvest. Sometimes you have a lot of horseshoe crabs in there. Used to be that they would take the horseshoe crabs and they burn them, because they didn't. The rationale is that they didn't want the horseshoe crabs to be trapped again, so they will burn them. But then you will go out, and then the horseshoe crabs will get trapped again. Then they will come back, they collect it, and then they burn it again. Okay, so actually it serves no purpose. The last time I went there, I actually saw a whole basket of horseshoe crabs. They were kept in there, and the guy who is always there said that they are keeping it for release of religious release for good karma. So yeah, so the thing is, we actually have no data on how much they are catching. They are there every day. We are there maybe once a month, and because they are there every day, they are catching this every day, and so what they do with this every day, we really don't know. Yeah. Okay. Prawn fishermen in the area catch about 70 kilograms of prawn. Apparently, yes, they do. I think they spoke to you about prawns or something. Okay. The long-term threats to horseshoe crabs is habitat loss, and I think the habitat is very important for any animal to sustain all the life stages. The biggest problems with horseshoe crabs is that it is caused because of coastal development or land reclamation, river development, and monocultures. Monocultures refer to a business. It could either be aquaculture or agriculture, but the land is basically converted to do some sort of culturing. So prawn culture or fish, something like that, culturing. So this is a map of Singapore. The first picture is 1950. The one up there is 1950, and this one is 2002. And it shows the amount of areas that used to be natural, and then the second picture here shows that the natural spaces for the coastline, this area on top, these areas here, and a few places down south. Okay, this loss of habitat because of coastal development is very hard to manage, because you want development, but at the same time we are using spaces that are home to other animals as well. So to find the balance requires quite a bit of planning ahead, knowing that these are important habitats, as well as how do you manage coastal development. So I'm going to show you another video. This is a case study of what happened with coastal development along Kinmen Bay, somewhere in Taiwan. It used to be a fishing village, a very rich fishing village. People used to go out, catch fish and come back. But then they were eventually told that they're going to develop that particular bay into a port, a commercial fishing port that promised to bring the fishermen a lot of money. It didn't work, so the whole story turned out to be quite a depressing case study. At the end of this development, they realized that all the Chinese horseshoe crabs in that area disappeared. There was no juvenile, no adult. They searched for years and they did not manage to find anything. So this was a documentary. The documentary is called The Lost Sea, and let's see what they say. Story of what happened in Kinmen Bay, which is quite sad. To see coastal development wiping out an entire population of horseshoe crabs in the area is very similar to what could happen in Singapore. We do have that one particular place in Singapore where we have so much of horseshoe crabs, a very high density. If that entire area is used for coastal development, then that entire area will probably wipe out the population of horseshoe crabs more or less, because that's where you find the biggest density. So Japan wants to do something like that, build a wall, and they want to do this because they say this is how we can prevent tsunami from happening. Japan also has horseshoe crabs, and apart from horseshoe crabs, there are many other sea life that require a boundary between the shoreline and the water itself. So having a wall, 400 kilometers stretch of wall along the coastline, can you imagine the kind of damage that would do to animals that require that boundary and that space? In fact, 400 kilometers might probably just be a starter kind of thing, because they actually calculated that they need 14 kilometers of wall to put up that wall so you can protect the entire coastline from the effects of tsunami. Okay, another long-term effect is land reclamation, and in Singapore you know that land reclamation has happened quite a fair bit. One of the areas that we are quite concerned about is the northern side. The northwest mangroves are one of the last few patches of mainland mangroves left on mainland Singapore. If the land that contains these mangroves is used for land reclamation, okay, the animals that use the mangroves as a boundary, including the horseshoe crabs, that land will not be available for the horseshoe crabs anymore, and what happens is that the population is immediately wiped out. Now, land reclamation is slightly different from coastal development in that you are developing the coastline slowly, so the horseshoe crabs have time to move to some other place. But with land reclamation, you seal off an entire area. Whatever animals that are benthic that's on the bottom, you just dump sand on it. immediately. There's no way for them to go anywhere, so they will all die simultaneously. So land reclamation is like a sudden killer. You just drop the sand on it, you smother them, and then they die. That's it. Okay, so that's another long-term threat. So this is a picture of Singapore's land reclamation. Most of reclamation has happened on the southern side of Singapore, but we are concerned that there may be reclamation that may start on the northern side of Singapore as well. Yeah. Another long-term threat is river development. A lot of juvenile horseshoe crabs are found along the rivers because once they go out to the sea, they are vulnerable to predation by other bigger animals. So a lot of the juveniles tend to be within rivers and streams. Damming up rivers and streams or turning them into concrete canals will not help the horseshoe crabs because there is no place for them to stay anymore. Damming up rivers also causes a lot of siltation and sedimentation problems, which changes the morphology of the ground. And so when that changes, the horseshoe crabs or juvenile horseshoe crabs may not like that place anymore. Now, you can start to search for other places, but when you don't have any more places to go by, where would you go next? Okay. In Singapore, as I mentioned, okay, the threats to horseshoe crabs will then therefore be damming up rivers, coastal development, land reclamation, as well as any sediment loss, or sediment that is not suitable for horseshoe crabs that is being deposited in the ground. Okay, as well as pollution. We have a lot of abandoned fishing nets along Singapore's coastline, and these fishing nets do trap horseshoe crabs. We have rescued several horseshoe crabs that have been caught in fishing nets before. Okay, so in Singapore you have these two species, okay, and these are the places where you find the horseshoe crabs in Singapore. We have found them in these places before, but the horseshoe crabs that we find in the most numbers is that red dot up there. When we did a density survey last year, we realized that there's actually a few hundreds of thousands of horseshoe crabs in that area. You extrapolate the numbers to the whole, it's a few hundreds of thousands of horseshoe crabs. There has been no other place on Earth where a study has been done where the density of mangrove horseshoe crabs exceeds what we find in that area of the red dot. They may have it, but it hasn't been documented. So as of now, it really stands that the red dot carries the largest number of horseshoe crabs, mangrove horseshoe crabs. All the other black dots, you find either mangrove horseshoe crabs or coastal horseshoe crabs, or in some places you do find both species of horseshoe crabs as well. So they do use the habitat, although they are not there at the same time. They do use the habitat at different intervals, but they do need that sediment and that particular type of ground to be able to beach up and rest. Okay, so to ensure the survivability of horseshoe crabs, okay, what we need is to ensure that their habitat is maintained, their habitat is not destroyed. A very well managed ecosystem will ensure that the habitat is continuous. You need to have rivers for the juveniles, the rivers open up to the sea, you need to have a certain kind of substrate. For the mangrove horseshoe crabs, you need a muddy substrate. For the coastal horseshoe crabs, they prefer a bit more of a sandy substrate, but you need that opening into these places so that you can allow the horseshoe crabs to be where they are. And so on our part, I think we need to consider the land use in those areas and the impact. So number one, any changes to the development or any development along the coastline can cause geomorphological changes or changes to the spawning ground, as well as it might inhibit movement to other habitats. So if there's a range where they are and we cut off this, the horseshoe crab can't move anymore, that's going to cause a problem because you need to ensure that they can move. If something happens in this area, they can always move to the other area. Now the immediate conservation goal, which is very important, okay, is to first get horseshoe crabs a proper status in the IUCN Red List. Currently they are data deficient. The three Asian species, the Chinese horseshoe crab, the mangrove horseshoe crab, and the coastal horseshoe crabs, they have no name. They are not important, they are data deficient, and the reason is because we have no insufficient data to classify them. NSS filed a notion initial presentation in the Japan conference, so it's not so clear. But this actually shows Carcinoscopus, this mangrove horseshoe crabs, which parts of Southeast Asia you find them. This is the coastal horseshoe crab, which parts of Southeast Asia you see them. This is the Chinese horseshoe crab, most of it is on the Chinese side, but you do find some on the southern tip as well. And this is the Atlantic horseshoe crab, the American horseshoe crab that you find on the American coastline. Up to now, they still don't have a proper status, apart from the American horseshoe crab. The rest don't have a proper status. Okay, so in order to move ahead with conservation, we need to engage policymakers as well as protect the necessary habitats. Maybe not all habitats, but those habitats that are necessary, crucial, or last remaining habitats need to be protected so that we are able to conserve the habitat that the horseshoe crabs need. Now, on a longer term conservation goal, okay, there is this issue of sea level rise, and so changes in sea level will change the shoreline, and so when your shoreline changes, where will the horseshoe crabs migrate to? If there's going to be a change in where they are going to be 50 years later or 100 years later, if there's going to be a change, then we should start planning on how to protect the place that they are going to be rather than the place that they are at the moment. So research has been done, and they did find that there will be changes in temperature and there will be changes in the depth of the water level, and they have predicted or projected where they have predicted and projected where the horseshoe crabs will be in 2050, and so there is movement going on now to protect those habitats and not to develop those habitats immediately. So for the mangrove species, this is where they are found now. In 2050, they are predicted to have moved further north in this region here. So you realize that they are not found so much at present, but in 2050 they are predicted to have moved up to this region here. And for the coastal species as well, prediction is that they are not here at the moment, but they will be in this region in 2050. So if these are the projections, then it is crucial that we now start to plan how to protect those habitats so that in 2050, if they do move up further north, then there's a place for them to be at. The movement of marine animals, like most other animals, they take place over time and is gradual. As long as the space is available for them to move, they will move. And so if we keep the habitat intact for them, then that will all be necessary for them to sustain the survival. Okay, so I think there are many ways that you can protect animal, and I think most importantly for this species, rather than just protecting the animal, you need to protect the habitat. Studies have been done to show that the animal is very habitat specific. If it likes a muddy substrate, it likes a muddy substrate. There is a certain depth to which the animal will go and a certain height to which it will go up to. It needs a certain kind of substrate. So being a very habitat specific animal, I think instead of focusing on how to protect the animal, we should be looking at how to protect the habitat. Habitat itself is an entire ecosystem. The animal that's there is eating other animals. Horseshoe crabs are being eaten by something else. The eggs are being eaten by something else. By protecting the whole habitat, we are able to protect the whole ecosystem and let it run as naturally as it will, as it should as well. So yeah, I think it's important to integrate and build partnerships so that we can keep the habitat as it is. So most of the information that I presented today, So most of the information I presented today was actually from the International Workshop on Horseshoe Crabs organized by the IUCN conference. What I'm holding there is Chinese horseshoe crabs. Species is very large. There were larger specimens, but someone else had them and they were taking photo with it and I couldn't wait. So I took the smaller one, and that was the smaller one. I think it's about the size of my body. Yeah. So yes, that's my presentation. Do you have any questions, or ideas and suggestions and thoughts you want to share.